Hey girl, hey, welcome to my journey, my mess, and my space. I am your host, life coach Robyn, and sis, let's clean up this mess. So as always, I want to remind you that you already have everything that you need within to do this work. And that's why no one can dictate to you what your healing should look like or what it should feel like. Because although we have similar stories, the people, the energy, and those spaces are completely different. And that's why it's important to take what you need from spaces like this, tweak that, make it your own, and allow that to help you navigate your journey. So I am excited because I have another special guest, and her name is Rashidah Butler-Jackson. And once again, if I'm not scrolling on TikToks, I have my friends like, who do you love that I need to be talking to? So she came highly, highly recommended, and I'm so excited. So Rashidah, come on and give us a little bio, and then we'll jump into our conversation.
I'm Rashidah Butler-Jackson. Super excited to be here. So thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I am currently in Charlotte, North Carolina, but I'm from Wisconsin. I'm a mompreneur. So I stay at home with my 6-year-old and homeschool him. And then I run a business, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I love God. I love my family. I love people. I love serving. And I'm super excited to be here for this conversation. I also got my tissue because I'm a crier and I don't know where we're going tonight, Robyn. So just in case, I'm ready.
Well, well, do I need to get my tissue?
I,
Okay.
I don't know. I'm just saying, be prepared. Be prepared.
You should have said this beforehand. I already told you the sinuses. Okay. But
Right.
I'm so happy to have you. When we did the pre-interview, I did tell Ebony, like, oh my gosh, I love her. I'm so excited to have this conversation. So welcome and thank you for being willing to share this space with me and my viewers. And I can't wait to jump into this conversation. So before I get started, um, I do want to talk about you, the brand, and then I want to transition into you, the woman. Okay, so let's start with you telling us a little bit about is RBJ, right?
Yes.
Okay, tell us a little bit about your consulting business.
Okay. So RBJ is my baby. So I am a mommy, but RBJ is my firstborn. That's my baby. So RBJ Community Consulting was started almost 7 years ago. So I'll be in business for 7 years in May. I am a solopreneur. So I solely work for myself. I don't have a team. I don't have anyone helping or supporting. And I have only worked for myself for almost 7 years. So God is so, so good because I've been able to sustain myself, sustain my business, and support my family. My business is centered around nonprofit growth, development, and management. So I have worked with nonprofits all over the nation to essentially sit down and say, are you doing what your mission says that you're supposed to be doing? And how can you be doing it better? Are you reaching the goals that you say you're going to reach? Are you connecting with the communities that you say you want to serve? Are you hearing the voices of the folks that you're trying to help? And more importantly, are you advocating for those folks to be able to help and uplift themselves? And I do strategic planning. I also help people to start nonprofits. You mentioned Ebony. Ebony is one of my clients. We started her nonprofit years ago, and we have been stuck together since then. And I do a lot of nonprofit board management and restructuring. And so COVID, though it was a very difficult time, it was a blessing for me because it allowed me to be able to reach clients in Ohio, in Illinois, in Atlanta. I've had clients in Texas. So I really have been able to support a lot of folks virtually, but I do also travel and do in-person consulting as well. So that's a little bit about my business. I kind of do it all, but I try to stick to those few main things that I just talked about.
Well, okay, well, let's dabble there a little bit. So, if someone came to you and, I really don't know what I'm doing. I have this really great idea and I want to start a nonprofit or a community organization. What advice would you give to her starting out? And she knows nothing.
Yeah. Great question. So my first question would be, do we need another nonprofit? I am very intentional. I do not start nonprofits for just anybody because the reality is there are 1.5 million registered nonprofits in the United States. That data is a little outdated, so I'm sure there are many more now. And so we have nonprofits that do everything. And so the first thing I always say to folks is, do we need another nonprofit? When folks come to me and say, I want to work with young people, or I want to serve single moms, or I want to serve, work in homeless, with unhoused communities, I always say, is there an opportunity for you to support folks already doing the work? So I'm very intentional about, listen, I'm not going to start your nonprofit if you don't have a unique approach, if you're not trying to solve a really specific problem that folks in your community are now already trying to solve. And so that's the first thing that we talk about is like, what problem are you trying to solve? And is it necessary for us to start another organization when you could potentially become a donor or become a volunteer or become a board member for an organization that already might be doing similar work? Once we work through that and we really get clear on what problem is being solved, once we really get clear on who we're serving, and what success looks like and what our metrics are, then we start to, talk about building out our mission statement and building out the programs and services that we are going to provide for that community. And then we go through the paperwork and we get board members, not just any board members, but board members that are going to work, board members that have the specific skill sets that you need. And so it really is a process. And sometimes it can take a couple weeks, but I've had clients where it took months and months and months for us to get their nonprofit off the ground, because I'm not about starting nonprofits. I'm about starting nonprofits that remain open and sustained beyond the year, where 50% of nonprofits fail statistically. So for me, I have to believe in it. I have to believe in you. I have to believe in the vision. But I have a 100% success rate. So everybody I have worked with to start nonprofits over the past 7 years has successfully gained and maintained their nonprofit status. And that's something I'm very proud of.
I love that. I love that. Now tell me, what is some of the biggest mistakes, or give me one or two the biggest mistakes you see new nonprofits make?
Not taking board member assignments seriously. So a lot of folks come to me and be like, well, I'm just gonna put my mama and my homegirl and my boyfriend on the board and I'll figure it out later. And then they start to realize that running nonprofits are a lot of work. And the reason that you have board members is to help you work. And so if you don't have folks that understand nonprofit space, understand funding and development and fundraising and grant writing, or have folks that have certain connections, you are not going to be successful, because everything is going to fall on you as the founder or the executive director. A board can make or break a nonprofit. So that's the number one mistake I see people make. Another one is, I just want to start a nonprofit to get grant funding. Right? Like, if you're starting a nonprofit because you think money is just going to fall into your lap because you have a nonprofit, you are sadly mistaken, especially when we look at the way of the world right now and where things are with the political climate, regardless of where you fall on the spectrum. Nonprofits have really, really been in a troublesome space where they're having to make some really hard and difficult decisions, right? And have hard and difficult conversations about funding and where money is coming from and what a nonprofit freeze or funding freeze could look like for them. And so you have to have people that are not believing in you, but believing in your mission, because you won't always agree as individuals. But if we can come together and say, listen, we believe in this mission, then you have folks that can stay at the table when things get difficult and when things get hard, and they can believe in the mission and push the mission forward, and help you to be successful. So those are like a few things that I always caution folks against very early on.
So when you talk about board members, how difficult is it when someone realizes, oh my goodness, I need to get rid of this person? Is there a certain process for anyone who's listening and thinking about adding their mama and grandmama and cousin? Is there a certain process that you have to follow? Is it legal stuff? Like, how does that work if you need to remove someone?
Yes, good question. So you have legally binding documents that are called governance documents for your nonprofit. Those are things like role descriptions for your board members, which outline roles and responsibilities of their day-to-day functions as a board member. You wouldn't take a job without a job description. So I always caution that if you're going to be a board member for a nonprofit board, you should have a document, a legally binding document that outlines how often you're meeting, what is your role and title, what are your responsibilities on the committees that you're serving on, things like that. You also have bylaws, and bylaws are the legally governing document that states how do you make decisions as a nonprofit board member? How do you remove someone if you need to? What does voting processes look like? What are your policies and procedures that you have in place? So typically, if you're having issues with a board member, of course, try to have a conversation with them, figure out what's going on, but you should have a role description and a legally binding document like a bylaw that says, hey, if you're not showing up to meetings, if you're not completing tasks, these are the consequences and the repercussions that you agreed to when you joined the board.
Okay. Because I know some people that, say, well, I'll just put my sister and, my cousin, and but this is a real thing. So I wanted you to explain that look, this is serious, and you need to make sure that you have the right people on board. So let's talk about, if I came and said, hey, Rashidah, I want to do this nonprofit, but I'm not much of a social person. I don't really like talking to people. Uh, I like to just do this and be done. Am I the right person to start a nonprofit? If it pertains to where I do have to deal with a lot of people, like with children, elders, whatever it is, am I the right person to start a nonprofit or a community organization?
Yeah, I know a lot of introverts like myself who run very successful nonprofits because it's all about the team that you build. So you hire on program managers to run your programs. You hire on community engagement folks to go out in the community and represent your organization. Again, your board members are the sounding board for your organization. They are your biggest cheerleaders. And so if you have a heart and you have a vision and you have the tools and resources, I would never discourage folks from starting a nonprofit just because they're introverts or, aren't necessarily good at engaging with people, because again, it's all about the sincerity and the people that are around you. Now, I do tell folks all the time, you have to have a pulse on the community. So if you're starting a nonprofit, I'm going to say to you, the community that you're trying to serve in, do they want you there? Do they need you there? Have you talked to them? Have you done a focus group? Have you surveyed folks in the neighborhood? And so that might require you to put yourself out there a little bit when you're doing that market research, just to make sure that there's actually a need for what you're providing. You might be talking to some of the folks from the neighborhood watch, right? Like in the community, or the block watch captain. You might want to meet with them before you set up a nonprofit in a certain neighborhood where you want to serve the residents. So sometimes in the beginning stage, there is going to be that networking and that connecting, because we never want to come into a community and just assume we know what's going on or assume that we know what's best for folks. It does require some rapport, some trust, and relationship building. But yeah, once you get that nonprofit up and going, you build your team, and your team can certainly be the folks that, like I like to say, are the ones with the boots on the ground.
Okay.
Everyone
So,
has a place.
okay. So we talked about the board members. Now, what about how important is to have volunteers? Is that really important when you are in the beginning stages of a nonprofit or a community organization? And what would be their roles as volunteers? What's the most important roles to fill as volunteers?
Yeah, I mean, board members are volunteers. So
Okay.
you already are legally required because you don't
Okay.
pay nonprofit board members. So those folks are already volunteers. They're giving up their time and their services for free. So you already have volunteers in the beginning. Yes, volunteers make up, they're the heart of nonprofit work. And so it is absolutely crucial, especially as a startup nonprofit, because you probably don't have funding to employ a full team of folks that you need. So you're going to need volunteers to come in and help with registration for different events that you're hosting. You're going to need volunteers to help you with social media, to promote the events and connect with folks online. It depends on what your programming is and what your nonprofit does. But, I've seen folks volunteer for everything from, like I said, signing folks in to events, to working the front desk at your building and getting folks signed in and telling them where they need to go. You might have nonprofit folks, volunteers that are mentors. So if you're working with young folks, you might have volunteers. So think about Big Brothers, Big Sisters of America. All of those big brothers and big sisters are volunteers. They're not being compensated or paid for their time, but that is what makes Big Brothers, Big Sisters of America what it is the volunteers. And so in most successful nonprofits, in some way, shape, or form, you're going to have volunteerism at the core of what you do. It's extremely important.
And if someone comes to you, do you also help them find funding? Is that part of your consulting also?
I try to stay in my lane, Robyn.
Okay.
I can, but that is not a service that RBJ Community Consulting provides. There have been times where I've done a little bit of like grant or proposal review for current clients that I have. And I do have an amazing Rolodex of grants and fund development people that I work with, that I, swear by and trust to send my clients to. So I do have a pipeline where I can kind of send folks where they need to go. I have a nonprofit accountant that I partner with. But yeah, I try to stay in my lane as much as possible. So
I wanted to ask because I know people,
that's a good
um,
question.
she help with funding. Can she help write this grant? So I wanted to make sure we threw that out there. Also, uh, what else is RBJ Community Consulting working on? What do you have in the works? Are there any events? Are there workshops? Is there anything that you want to talk about that's coming up?
Nothing coming up, but I am moving into a season where I want to do more workshops and like facilitation opportunities. So actually a couple of weeks ago, I was back home in UW Parkside where I was an official facilitator for the nonprofit development certificate that they offer to folks at the through the university. So myself and a few other instructors came together and built out a certification program where folks can come and attend, these 5 to 6 different sessions around different areas of fund development. And then from that, they become certified fund development professionals in nonprofit space. So I was blessed enough to be a facilitator for that, which was a huge deal for me, to be a certified facilitator for a UW extension public, right? Public university. Never saw that for my business, but that was huge. I do have a couple proposals and things in the works for some different nonprofit conferences that I want to start speaking at and doing more facilitating at. So I think that's the direction that I want to move in, is speaking more with large groups of folks, and kind of doing a catch all. Like, let's talk about strategic planning. Let's talk about branding for your nonprofit. Let's talk a little bit about structure and governance. And so, yeah, those are the things. So, y'all put a prayer up for me because, like I said, I got some proposals that are out in the universe right now, and I'm very excited to hear back on those opportunities.
Well, I want to say congratulations on that opportunity. And I know everything else that whatever's for you is going to manifest and it's going to be great. And I can't wait to hear about it. And however I can help, let me know. So let's transition into uh Rashidah, the woman. So tell me a little bit about Rashidah. We know you're a mom, we know you're a business owner, but tell me a little bit about Rashidah.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that because I think a lot of times we get stuck leading with our titles. And I have recently told myself I just turned 35 this year, and one of my personal goals for myself this year is to stop leading with my titles. I often go in rooms and I'm like, yep, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a business owner, I'm all of these things. But at my core, I am a survivor, right? Like I'm a survivor of some of the ugliest and worst things that folks can go through that I've been able to get myself through. I'm a thinker. I'm a challenger. I am a out of the box person that always wants to ask questions. Like a lot of people that are on this Zoom right now know me very well, and they know like I'm the why person. Tell me why. Tell me more about that. Like I love to connect. I'm a connector. I love to connect with people. And yes, I'm a mom, and yes, I'm a wife, and yes, I own a business, and those things are wonderful. But I find that like some of the most fruitful things that I'm connected to in my life come from my village, come from being a servant. So I serve on several boards. talked about board service. I serve on boards. That is my hard work, is staying connected to nonprofit spaces. I'm a believer. I believe in God. I'm a prayer. I will pray all day if I could. And so I'm a lot of things, but yeah, I am working on stepping away from starting with my title, right? Like, because I'm so much more than that. And in recent years, I realized that I've really confined myself to just being a wife and just being a mom. And I'm so much more than that.
I'm so glad you said that because a lot of women they do get stuck with the leading with the title, and I'm like, I want to know more about you though. Who are you? Who do you see when you look in the mirror? How do you feel about her? So let's start there. Because we did do the pre-interview and we, had some deep discussions about some things, but let's start here. Was there a particular moment when you realized I'm not happy with the person looking back at me in the mirror? Was there a particular moment?
Yeah.
We need to get the tissue.
Yeah. So it really hit me when we moved. We left, like I said, I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and actually it's our 2 year. We closed on our house about a week and a half ago, 2 years ago. So we're in like this anniversary space of moving and picking up our life with our then 4-year-old and kind of starting over. And my husband, he went to North Carolina A&T, and so he was coming back home. He had been here for 4 or 5 years, had a lot of connections and friends. And so for him, he was and he's an extrovert. Like me and him are total opposite. He can sit and talk and be around people all day, and I am absolutely a homebody. And so when we moved out here, it really made me realize how isolated I am, right? And like how I don't know how to really foster relationships with new people. I'm not great at networking. And you say, well, your whole business is connecting with people and working with people. Yeah, but I don't like talking to grown-ups is very scary. Like I can talk to kids all day. I used to be a teacher. I worked at the Boys and Girls Club for 7 years. I love talking to young people. Talking to grown-ups is very intimidating and it is very scary. So I realized like my husband would be out hanging with his friend and doing dinner at this networking event. And I was just sitting at home and I'm with our son all day. And sometimes I would get up and I wouldn't even get dressed because I'm like, oh, nobody's going to see me. And I'm just home all day with my kid. What do I need to get dressed for? Why do I need to do my hair? And I just realized I was miserable, Robyn. Like, honestly, moving out here was so difficult because everything that I knew and loved had been taken away from me. And I was forced to really deal with myself, right? And I started to realize a bunch of things that I didn't like about myself and my reality, and some things that I really love that I had neglected about myself and my reality.
So
So
let's
the past few years have been rough.
so let's talk about the healing journey. What were what do you feel? Because we all start and we stop because we're not perfect. So let's talk about the early stages of your journey of healing. What were some of the things that kept you from progressing in your healing?
I wasn't talking to anybody. Like I was just kind of holding it all, like managing my household, running this business, being a mom, running, my mom has health challenges. So I'm trying to keep up with her and knowing what's going on with her. And there was never time for me. There was never time for me to just like sit with myself and say, how are you feeling today? How are you processing things? Like who's taking care of you? Who's looking out for you? Right. And I just was not getting that, right? That support. But I also wasn't asking for it. I didn't feel like people saw me, but I also didn't know how to say, can you see me? And so I was just really torn between creating expectations for folks, but not really being clear on like how those expectations came to be. And I'm big on like, I would do it for you, so why wouldn't you do it for me? And that's something I'm currently struggling with. Like the way that I treat people, I always am like, well, why don't you show up for me the way I show up for you? Why don't you think about me in these intentional ways that I think about you? But I had to realize that like everybody is going to be different. Everybody shows love in a different way. I had to be able to learn how to like start advocating for myself. And that was super important. And I think the turning point for me was like one day I woke up and my friend who stays out here was like, get up and like get dressed and, let's go take a walk. And so she and I took a walk and I just kind of started shedding these layers of like, it was so hard for me to even throw on gym clothes and come out here and take a walk with you because I wanted to just be isolated and be by myself. And she didn't let me, right? Like she pulled, shout out to Tia, one of my best friends, Tia, who actually lives out here, my nephew's mom. And she didn't let me. She was like, no, like we gotta pull you out of this. You're more than this, you're greater than this, you're bigger than this. Let's go back to times where you felt good about yourself. What can you think about? What was happening? Who was surrounding you? What were the things that you were feeling? Let's go back to a time where you loved your body. Let's go back to a time where you felt good in your relationships. And so having someone to kind of see me, right? But also me being able to say, I don't feel seen, kind of saved me and pulled me out of that space that I've been in.
I know you said Miss Tia asked those important questions, and I stress that all the time. Your space is so important.
Yeah.
We really don't understand when we're sitting in spaces with certain people and certain conversations are had, it sits with you. So if you're in a negative space already and you go and you sit with someone who is also in a negative space, how are you going to get out of that? And I don't think a lot of people realize that. Like I love my friend, but sometimes your friend is not what you need at that moment because she has her own stuff and now we're just having a pity party. So those spaces are so important. So shout out to Tia. Hey Tia.
About the tea. My girl. Yes.
So let me ask you this, because you talked about those questions that she did ask you. So in the beginning, what were some of those negative beliefs that you did have about yourself that maybe Tia brought out and you had to address? Or she, kind of forced you to, hey girl, let's talk about this. What were some of those negative beliefs that you had about Rashidah?
Yeah. I didn't like my body, so I was very self-conscious. Like having a baby is a thing. Any mama out there knows that it does things to you. And I was an older mom, right? I had my baby, I was almost 29 when I had my baby, and that's considered like all of my kids have my friends have teenagers now, and my nephews and nieces are teenagers. And I'm like, okay, I got a newborn over here. Like, let's figure this out. And so I was older and my body was changing. My baby is a rainbow baby, so I did unfortunately deal with a miscarriage before I had my son, and that really did a number on my body and created a very difficult pregnancy for me with my son. And so I didn't like my body, and I didn't understand why my body had betrayed me when I had my first baby, and why I couldn't be a mom and why my body couldn't do what it was designed to do. And so physically, I was angry and didn't like what I was seeing when I was looking in the mirror, and emotionally and spiritually, having dealt with the loss. Still to this day, I question, like, why for someone who's wanted to be a mom and has nurtured and mothered so many kids, nieces and nephews and community kids, and all my hundreds of students I've had. And so I was angry, like, why wasn't I enough? What didn't I do? Why didn't my body do what I needed it to do? So that was the thing, falling in love with my mom bod, as I call it, my mom bod. Um, Also, my spiritual space. So back home in Milwaukee, I was very involved in my church. I had been there for 7 years. I was on several ministries, had a very close relationship with my pastor and my first lady, was on planning committees and doing our annual women's conference. And then I came out here and I didn't have a church family and I didn't have a place of worship to go to. And so my spiritual life was kind of shaky because I was like, oh, I need a place. I need a place to go. I need sisters that can pray with me. I need to be connected to believers and folks that understand where I am spiritually. So that was hard. Um, and just finding myself. Like I feel like when I came out here, it was like, okay, who am I? Because back home I'm Rashidah and everybody knows Rashidah and everybody loves Rashidah. And, I go in spaces and people run up and they hug me and they know my family and they know where I came from. And then I came out here and it was just like, oh, that's Marcel's wife. That's Tafari's mom. And so I just didn't like the fact that like I didn't feel like I had an identity anymore. And so being a survivor different types of abuse and relationships, and still trying to heal from that and building trust and rebuilding friendships that had been damaged. It was just like a lot of work happening at one time. And sometimes when you got so much to do, you know how you just go lay in your bed and be like, okay, I'm just not gonna do nothing because it's just too much and you don't know where to start. That's where I was. I was like, okay, I know a bunch of work has to be done, but like, where do I start? So the breaking point for me was my grandfather passed away a couple years ago, and I was on a plane getting ready to go back home to his funeral, and I had an anxiety attack. I had a really bad anxiety attack, and it was so bad that I literally got off the plane and I missed my grandfather's funeral because I could not get back on the plane. My fear of flying and just my emotions and my fear of seeing certain family members that I don't have good relationships with, it overtook me. And so that's when I was like, okay, this thing is controlling me. It's taking me over. I got to do something different. So there was a lot happening when I first got out here, and that's the space I was in, and that's the questions that we were talking about.
So is it fair to say that that was one, the plane incident, was that one of the first instances where you started, or did it force you to look at Rashidah and look at Rashidah's pain and separate the two? Is that fair to say that that was one of the first signs like, Rashidah, hey, we got to do something about this?
Yeah, definitely,
Because,
definitely.
we'll talk about our spaces, but when it
Yeah,
came to you in that moment being alone, well, I'm assuming you were alone, but just thinking like to yourself, like, I have to fix this, this is
yeah,
work that I need to do. Did it start there? Did that play a big
yeah,
role, that
yeah.
episode?
That was it. That was the moment because I think before then I was still kind of like, well, I still got my business and I still got, and I was like making excuses for like, well, even though everything feels like it's crumbling over here, like you still got a few good things over here. And then it was just like I didn't want to feel ungrateful. So that was the thing too, is like everybody looks at me and they're like, Rashidah, you have a husband and you have the house and you have the kid and you have the business and you get to stay home while your husband takes care of you and your life is perfect. What do you have to complain about, right? And folks don't even know that like you're literally crumbling because you're sitting at home with a kid all day who needs you for every single thing, doesn't have siblings to entertain him. I'm his teacher, I'm his mother, I'm his nurse, I'm his lunch lady, right? I'm all of these things. By the time the day ends, I have nothing to give to myself. And so yeah, that moment I was just like, okay, this because that was my moment to go and say goodbye to my granddad and be with my family and connect with folks who I needed to connect with. And my anxiety didn't allow me to do that. And that messed me up. Like to this day, I'm mad at myself that I missed my granddad's funeral. I'm mad at myself that I couldn't get on that plane. I'm mad at myself that like my husband had to stop what he was doing and come get me because I literally was standing in the middle of the Charlotte airport shaking to the point where paramedics had to come and get me to breathe and give me, tips and tricks of calming myself down. Like, and I said, I don't want that for my life because the next big thing that happens, I need to show up for myself, for my family, for my child. Like, I can't let this happen. I can't let another big moment pass me by. So, shortly after that, I reached out. I talked to folks. I got diagnosed with uh, depression and anxiety. And then I did get on anxiety meds, which have been a life changer for me. And anybody who is hesitant about that, I am open to having that conversation because I really believe that my anxiety meds are one of the things that like saved my life. And I started to slowly see a shift when I could regulate my mind, when I could process and think about one thing at a time, where I started to figure out like, who am I? Who am I trying to be out here? Like, what is the brand, like you said, and the woman that I'm trying to be? And so that was a huge step for me, is like getting some help, like professional help. Not my homegirl, not this person, not venting on Facebook, but like talking to a professional and having someone say, yeah, you got some things that you got to work through. And so that's where I've been. That's the journey that I'm on now, is trying to figure out what's next and what that
And
looks like.
I'm so glad that you shared that because a lot of times people see, as we said before, the brand, they see the what we allow people to see of us. And they forget that we're also human. So you got me tearing up. Look at you. Um, People forget that, you're also human and you have these things that you live with. You have memories, you have trauma, and sometimes you're just trying to make it through the day. So I am so glad that you was able to be transparent in this space and felt comfortable enough to share that because there are so many women who are just showing up. That's all. They're just showing up and they're barely making it. So I want to thank you for holding that space and showing women like it's okay. It's okay. Keep going. Get that therapist that you need. Get that medication that you need. Talk to somebody. It's okay. You're human. So thank you for that. So okay, let's move on. Okay. So now that you started your healing journey, how do you define self-love? Because everybody got their own version, but when it comes to Rashidah, how does she define self-love compared to the way you looked at it before healing started?
Yeah, I define it for me. I define it by like how I feel when I wake up in the morning, and what I can do. Like, hey, Rashida, you got dressed today. That's a win. You did your hair today. That's a win. You made a healthy meal for yourself today. That is a win. It's not these big grand gestures of I gotta have a spa day, and like those things are important, right? But sometimes it's just the small things of like taking your meds, drinking enough water. Those small things that sometimes when you're in a depressive state or when you are dealing with an anxiety attack, like all those things get neglected. So that is how I define it is what are the things that I did to just like take care of myself today, and get through the day, right? And also not comparing because I did a really poor job of making my timeline try to fit everybody else's timeline. Like I gotta do this by 30, and by 35, I gotta be here. And by, this time I gotta have this thing. And it's like, why? Why? What if that goal is not rooted in what God told you and what the ancestors are guiding you and telling you to do? Baby, shift, pivot, be flexible, be okay with missing the milestone sometimes. I define self-love by like giving myself grace because there are times when I miss the mark. Like in the course of a day, Robyn, I am paying bills for this house. I'm trying to feed my child. I'm trying to make sure that that bills at my rental property get paid back home, and making sure that my deliverables are done for my client. I'm trying to get. I told you before we hopped on this call, I went to Zumba. I didn't get to finish the whole class, but I didn't let that stop me. So self care is instead of me saying I'm not going to Zoom because I got this podcast tonight, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do 35 minutes of class and I'm gonna feel good when I get back in my car and come home. That's love. That's self-care. Like that is not cheating yourself and selling yourself short because something is something. Something is never nothing. Something is always going to be something. And so, whew, Jesus. So that's for me, that's what it is. It's not, and it is also saying to my husband, you know what? I need a few days. I need to go. So for my birthday, he treated me to go see Sarah Jakes Roberts. And I went to Riley for a couple nights and I stayed in a VRBO and I was alone and it was amazing. And I'm going to do that again come summer. I'm going to take another few days and get a hotel and be away. And so sometimes it's just that it's just giving yourself what you need in the moment and not trying to figure it all out at one time. Just like, what do you need in this moment? How can you take care of yourself better in this moment?
I stress making yourself a priority. I always tell people we're so comfortable with passing out our time, our energy, our love, and we don't do that for ourselves. And we wonder why we're stuck because we're not a priority. It's okay to be a priority in your life. It's important, it's necessary. In order to navigate your space, you have to make sure you're good. And so many of us give from, as they say, a half full cup, but I learned in my healing that you should be reaping from my overflow only. reaping from my overflow. As I take care of Robyn, as I love Robyn, as I heal Robyn, as I grow, as I learn all those beautiful things about Robyn, you should reap from that. I should not be given what I don't have. So I had to learn to be selfish about Robyn. So let's talk about this. How do you handle some of the setbacks when you find yourself slipping? How do you handle those spaces and say, Rashidah, no? What does that look like when you're having a setback?
Um, I haven't fully figured that out yet because I'm still in a space where I'm really hard on myself when I drop the ball. Um, I know what I need to do. I need to give myself grace. I need to say, good job trying, because at least you tried. Like, so I know what I need to do. Putting those things into practice is a totally different conversation. So it's getting to the point of, they say knowledge is power, and I don't believe that. Application of knowledge is power. To know something and to just sit on it and know it, that's where ego exists because I know it and I know more than you and I'm better than you. That's where pride cometh before the fall, right? So for me, I have to get to the point where like knowledge is no longer empowering for me. I need to empower myself by applying that, and being very intentional about being aware of what triggers me and being aware of like, okay, this setback happened, but why? And what moment did you slip? At what moment did things start going left? And what can we do differently to prevent that from happening? So for me, in my setback moments, Robyn, I've been working on being more reflective and not just of the negative beating myself up and like, oh, you didn't, but also being reflective of like, like I said, where did it happen? What were you feeling when it happened? Where were you? Did you need a different environment? Did you not get enough sleep? Did that conversation trigger you because of things you said? I've also learned that like setbacks happen for me. I was talking to someone earlier, and April is very hard for me, right? And so I give myself a little extra grace in April because April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, which is very triggering for me and folks that I'm connected to. I'm a survivor of intimate partner violence, and the anniversary for that incident happened in April. And May is the due date of the child that I lost. And so I'm rolling out of April where I'm processing violence and trauma, and then I'm rolling into honoring the life that I never knew. And so setbacks are probably going to happen. April, May, give yourself a little grace. Maybe don't try to pack your plate so full. Maybe just get a couple appetizers and a little side salad. Don't try to get the entree and do all the things because that might be too much, right? And so being able to know where I'm at, and being preventative of the setbacks when I can, but then being reflective of the setbacks when I can.
I'm so glad that you said that because it's so important once again to take care of yourself, to know that you know what, this is not going to be a good time for me, and instead of trying to show up as what everybody else needs and who everyone else needs, it's just important to show up for you because it's about you. This is your space, this is your journey. So I love that you shared that because so many women need to hear that it is okay to show up for yourself when you need to. Yes, I love you, but go away. Let your daddy feed you. It's okay to take care of you. And so I'm glad that you share that because so many successful women, they don't hold that space for themselves. It's important to be who they say they are, but you're also human. So it's important to take care of you. So what was one of the most rewarding parts of your healing journey that you want to share with us? Is there something that happened that you're like, girl, you are doing it? I'm proud of you.
Yeah, being able to be in rooms with certain people, um, and be content with apologies that I will never get. I know they're not coming. They just not gonna come. And for a long time, a lot of my heaviness was centered in like they gonna apologize to me one day. I'm gonna I'm gonna get mine. I'm gonna get my get back, and I'm gonna do this and do that. And now, baby, you can talk about certain people, and I'm like, that's okay. Wish them well. You know what I mean? Like, cool. And if we happen to be in the same room, because Milwaukee is real small, Yep, I see them over there. They see me over here. It used to be where I would have to walk out of the room, right? If I was in the room with my father, for example, I don't have a relationship with my father. I don't. I used to. I grew up with my dad. He's here. He's in my life. He is not physically absent. Um, but he and I have not had a relationship for a very long time. And there used to be a time and space where I could not be in the same room with my dad. That was one of the things that caused that anxiety attack of going, because this was his stepfather, his bonus father, who passed away. And my mind was like, oh, I gotta go and I gotta see my dad. And how is that gonna make me feel when I'm trying to grieve and mourn, right? And so being able to now talk about him, be in the same room with him. I have siblings. My siblings have a relationship with him. I do not. That used to make me feel away. Now it doesn't. So I think how I show up in spaces that once crippled me, that once held me down, and being able to like be very victorious in those spaces, those are my wins. And that's kind of how I grade myself. I don't grade it on anything external. But like I said, when I'm like, oh, we just talked about my daddy and I didn't like roll my eyes and suck my teeth and have an attitude for the rest of the night, go ahead. Like that's a win. Good job. Like you said, good job, Rashidah, that you did not let that ruin your day. Where a year ago, 6 months ago, 3 weeks ago, it would have. Sometimes it's just that simple for me.
Well, for someone who's listening and they're waiting on that apology that's probably not going to happen, what advice, if you're in the space of giving advice, what advice would you give someone who's just dead set on waiting for that forgiveness to happen, that I'm sorry, all of that, and they're stuck, refuse to move. It's literally dictating their life. What advice can you give to her?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not the advice giver, but for me, for Rashidah, I had to realize that my weight and my value is not conducive to the apology, right? Why is that apology so impactful on how I feel about myself and how I function day to day? And why am I giving someone or something that much power? If somebody's lack of apology can make you feel less than, and that's not to say that that apology could not be a part of your healing journey or could not make things easier. But for me, if that person passes away today and you know you'll for sure never get that apology, now what you waiting on? You gonna live the rest of your life being like, okay, maybe they would have apologized if they were still here, so I'm gonna still be mad about it, or maybe they would have said this or that. Like, when does enough become enough? For me, again, with my dad, I don't have any expectation of him other than for him to be who he has shown me he is. And so if I align that with understanding that he's the type of person that might not apologize, he also showed me that he's that type of person. So why would I expect him to be anything other than what he has showed me he is? Right. And I love my dad, right? Like I love my dad. I am grateful for everything that he has instilled in me. I see so much of myself in my father. And I also realize that like if he never apologizes and if we never get to a place of reconciliation, it does not bear any weight on me and the joy that I deserve to have for the rest of my life.
Well, that led into this question then. How has learning to choose Rashidah and make Rashidah a priority and just being loyal and faithful to Rashidah, how has that taught you how to show up in your other relationships and in your career? Make,
I'm big on
making
integrity.
you a priority, making you a priority. How do
Yeah,
you now? Yeah.
I'm big on integrity. And so for me, I can't. make a living out of telling my nonprofit clients how to take better care of themselves, how to prioritize the things that they need, how to prioritize what their communities need if I'm not doing that for myself. And so for me, when we talk about making yourself a priority, I think it's twofold. Sometimes folks make themselves a priority and they completely neglect everything else in their life, which then you start to feel bad and you start to wonder, well, dang, I didn't cook dinner tonight and my baby didn't ate out for the past 3 days. Does that make me a bad mom? And so you're prioritizing yourself, but then you're not fully giving yourself time to enjoy that space because you're thinking about everything else. So for me, what has been important for me is to put systems in place where I can prioritize myself and not feel bad about it, where I can make sure that when, my husband and I have started doing Safari Tuesdays, where every Tuesday he stays home with my son and I get to leave the house. But as a homeschooling mom, I know that if I leave my house for 6 hours and my baby don't get his work done, he's falling behind, which means on Wednesday, I got to come and do double duty and I got to be super mom and get him caught up on his curriculum. Where if prioritizing myself and really enjoying it, I could simply do the lesson plan on Monday night, tell my husband exactly what I need him to do, and then trust that my husband is going to do it. That way, when I go to prioritize myself on Tuesday, I can actually enjoy it. So sometimes it's just being able to identify if you're going to prioritize yourself, if you're going to be a little selfish, what are the things you need to do so that you can fully immerse yourself in that prioritization and not feel bad about it or not make things harder for yourself when you come back from that prioritizing space. And that was huge for me in my business and in my personal
I love that. I love I love that. I love that. This space is about accountability. It's about practicing um that self accountability. That's so important to me. Can you share with someone who's listening how important? Well, let me say this. The reason I touch on it, people get mad at me when I do this accountability thing. Looking in the mirror is one of the hardest things to do. But I stress that you cannot heal what you don't acknowledge. And sometimes, which, yes, things have been done to us. Yes, things has been said to us, but it's our responsibility how we're going to allow that to dictate our lives. Are we going to allow it to control us? Are we going to allow it to keep us stuck, keep us angry, keep us bitter? So that's where I come in about the accountability. What is keeping you hostage? What is holding you from moving forward? So in your space of healing, can you share where you had to hold Rashidah accountable? Because a lot of women need to hear the accountability part where you had to check yourself, really check yourself because you were the problem. Is that
life.
is that a tough question? Because sometimes for people it is, and you don't have to answer it, but if you have an answer,
It is a tough question only because I feel like that's a daily thing, right? Like it's something that I have not fully arrived at. I realize that I have a really unhealthy relationship with food. And this is something where I realize that like I comfort eat and I stress eat and I eat to celebrate when things are going well and I eat to celebrate when I've had a bad day and I eat sweets later than I should at night. And so one of the things that I had to do was reach out to folks that are close to me and say, listen, I'm not doing well. I'm eating and I'm stress eating, and it's not helping me feel good when I wake up in the morning, and it's not helping me with these health goals that I have. Here's what I need. Excuse me. I need you to hold me accountable in these ways. Sometimes you got to know when you are not enough to do it, right? Because me placing that on myself to say, on top of all of these other things that you have to do, you also have to hold yourself accountable and figure it out on your own. That's unfair to me. When I have a village of people, when I have a support system that I know I can go to, who I know will check in and say, you've been snacking tonight? Okay, let's make sure that next time we snack, we go from chips to a handful of nuts. Next time we snack, let's try to do a protein shake, right? So being able to have folks that can walk that journey with you until you're strong enough to do it on your own, right? Like I know that I am not strong enough on my own to hold myself accountable. So I gotta tap into the folks that love me and say that they care about me. And it's almost like a crutch, right? Like you walk with that crutch until your leg or your break or your fracture is healed and that bone is strong and sturdy. And then you can do it on your own. So I'm in a crutch season, Robyn. I will be very honest. I'm in a crutch season where I'm calling folks and I'm saying, listen, I need you to make sure that at 5 o'clock on Friday, I hit this deadline. Just put a reminder in your phone, because if I know you're going to check on me, and if I know I'm going to check on me, and somebody else is going to check on me, then that's going to make sure I get it done. And then one day I'll get to the point where maybe I can reach that deadline. But to, like I said, if I know the season that I'm in, that accountability. So now I'm being accountable to myself by asking for accountability. That is a form of accountability, right? Like we have to reshape how we define things. Sometimes accountability is not like you saying, no, Rashidah, you can't do that because it's 9 o'clock and you're not snacking. Sometimes accountability is saying, you know what, I'm going to hold myself accountable to reaching out and getting help with this. And that's just as important. And you have to celebrate that type of accountability as well.
I love that. I love that. And I'm going to reiterate what she said. Sometimes I'm not okay and I need help. That is a form of accountability. I'm going to say it again. Sometimes I'm not okay and I need help. For anybody listening that's struggling, sometimes I'm not okay and I need help. It's okay to start there. And if you have someone that you can count on, pick up that phone, send that text message, send that email, and reach out and say, I am not okay. I am not, because you have people that are
Sometimes,
willing to be there.
right.
Also,
And sometimes people don't have that. Like, I want to be very clear of like, I realize the blessing and the privilege I have in being able to say that. And for folks that don't have that, I say that, like, hey, there are online platforms, there are professional spaces where you can go and get, free counseling and free. So a quick Google search of like free counseling in my area, a support group that you might be able to join. So I acknowledge that like everybody doesn't have that village and that ability. But if you don't, there's still space for you to find something or someone, a book that you can read, a ministry that you can join. There's always a space where you can try to figure it out, even if you don't have that person that's one call away. So I don't want to be ignorant to the fact that like, some people don't have that, right?
and a lot of times, also, there are some people, and that's one thing that I had to come to terms with, that I did have those people, but because I was so stuck in my ways, also, it didn't allow me to utilize those people. And also because I was so stuck in my ways, and this was beginning healing and the early parts of healing, because of those ways, I wanted to be sitting in spaces where people agreed with what I said, people co-signed what I said, and it also kept me from progressing also. And so I want to stress that like she said, if you do not have those spaces, a quick Google search, if you're in church, if you have a community, and there's someone in that group that you feel comfortable with, reach out, do what you need to do to take care of yourself. But Rashidah, I want to say thank you. Like, this hour went by quick. And look, we only shared 3 tears.
I was gonna say we did really good. We didn't, yeah, like we did good. We
We,
talked
we
about the
shared
hard
only three
things, but we
tears.
got through. Yeah.
But I want to say thank you so much for being transparent and agreeing to share, with us your journey, the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I just want to say thank you for that, because there are so many women who are sitting in spaces and they feeling like, oh, this is the best I can do. This is the best I can be. And I want to have that business. I want to, go back to school. I want to be in that relationship. There are things I want, but I'm allowing my past and the ugly stuff to keep me stuck. So I want to say thank you for sharing and holding space with us. And I appreciate you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed.
So, as always, I want to say thank you for allowing me to share my journey, my mess, and my space. I am your host, Life Coach Robyn, and I will see you next time on Sis. Let's clean up this mess.